From the opening shot, Shooter pulls its audience into a world where trust is a luxury, survival is a skill, and betrayal is a guarantee. The film, released in 2007, is a pulse-pounding action thriller that keeps viewers on the edge of their seats, not just with its breathtaking sniper sequences but with a plot that twists like a bullet through shifting winds. At the center of it all is Bob Lee Swagger, a legendary Marine sniper, a man who has spent years perfecting his deadly craft in the most extreme conditions. But this isn't a war movie. It's a survival story, a conspiracy thriller, and a revenge tale all rolled into one. Swagger isn't just fighting against an enemy on the battlefield. He's fighting against an entire system that wants him dead. From the very first scene, the film establishes that Swagger is no ordinary soldier. He is a ghost in the mountains, a sniper so precise that his targets don't even know they're being hunted until it's too late. But despite his skill, Swagger is a man weary of war, living in isolation with only his dog for company, disconnected from a world that has left him behind. That is, until one fateful visit changes everything. A shadowy government operative, Colonel Isaac Johnson, arrives at Swagger's secluded cabin with an urgent and classified mission. There is a credible threat to the president's life, and only a marksman of Swagger's caliber can help stop it. Johnson presents Swagger with a seemingly patriotic duty: help them analyze potential sniper attack locations and prevent an assassination. But what seems like an honorable call to duty quickly turns into a nightmare. As Swagger meticulously surveys locations, calculating wind speeds, distances, and vantage points with the mind of a scientist and the instincts of a hunter, he unknowingly sets himself up. The moment of the attempted assassination arrives, and before he can react, he realizes he's been framed. Swagger isn't just running from bullets. He's running from an entire government machine that now sees him as public enemy number one. Wounded, alone, and with the full force of law enforcement hunting him down, he does what he does best. He disappears. This is where Shooter shifts into high gear. Swagger is a man at war, not with a foreign enemy but with the country he once served. Using his military training, survival skills, and sheer determination, he embarks on a one-man mission to expose the truth and take down the people who set him up. What follows is a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, filled with heart-stopping sniper duels, brutal hand-to-hand combat, and some of the most intense action sequences of the 2000s. But Shooter isn't just about action. It's a story about corruption at the highest levels, about how power twists justice, and about how the most dangerous enemy isn't the one you see, but the one pulling the strings from the shadows. As Swagger uncovers the dark conspiracy behind the assassination attempt, he realizes that the forces against him are far more powerful than he imagined. With the help of FBI agent Nick Memphis, a young but determined investigator who begins to see that things don't add up, Swagger starts piecing together the truth. The deeper they dig, the more they uncover about a web of government corruption, arms deals, and political manipulation that reaches into the highest offices of power. But exposing the truth isn't enough. Swagger is a hunted man, and the only way to clear his name is to do what he does best: take down those responsible. What follows is a relentless quest for justice, fueled by precision shooting, cunning strategy, and a burning desire for vengeance. The film builds to an explosive climax, where Swagger finally gets his shot, not just with a rifle, but at bringing justice to those who have spent their lives avoiding it. He is not just fighting for himself. He is fighting for every soldier who has been betrayed, for every innocent person caught in the crossfire of corruption. And as the final moments unfold, one thing becomes clear. In a world where the powerful manipulate the truth, sometimes the only way to deliver justice is from 1,000 yards away. This is Shooter, a film that doesn't just deliver action, but a story of betrayal, redemption, and the unbreakable will of a man who refuses to be silenced. And for those who love a good conspiracy thriller with bullets flying and justice hanging in the balance, this is a movie that hits its mark every time. The cold mountain air is still, the silence broken only by the whisper of the wind. In the vast wilderness, hidden among the rocky terrain, Bob Lee Swagger lies motionless, his sniper rifle steady, his breath controlled, his focus unshakable. A target moves in the distance, unaware of the unseen hunter watching from a mile away. With the precision of a machine, Swagger calculates wind speed, adjusts for bullet drop, and pulls the trigger. One shot. One kill. This is the world Swagger knows. A world where distance is an advantage, silence is survival, and hesitation means death. But war has a way of leaving scars, even on those who walk away from the battlefield. Swagger, once one of the most elite snipers in the U.S. Marine Corps, has left that life behind. Now, he lives in seclusion in the mountains, far from the corruption and deceit of the world he once served. His only company is his loyal dog, and his only purpose is existing one day at a time, away from the shadows that haunt him. That peace doesn't last. One day, a black SUV snakes its way up the long, winding road to his cabin. Swagger watches from a distance, instinctively checking his rifle before stepping out to meet his visitor. A man exits the vehicle, dressed in a suit but carrying himself like a soldier. His name is Colonel Isaac Johnson, and he brings a request that drags Swagger right back into the world he tried to leave behind. Johnson claims there is a credible threat against the President of the United States, a sniper assassination attempt planned during an upcoming public event. The government, he says, needs someone with unmatched precision, someone who understands how a sniper thinks, someone who can predict where the attack might come from before it happens. Swagger listens, his instincts warning him. He doesn't trust suits, doesn't trust the government that abandoned him, doesn't trust easy answers. But then Johnson says the words that dig into a soldier's soul, "Your country needs you." Against his better judgment, Swagger agrees to help, not to pull the trigger, but to analyze the situation. He studies the topography of the possible attack locations, maps out every potential vantage point, and calculates the perfect shot as only a sniper can. Days later, the event arrives. The president is in place, the security is tight, and Swagger's expertise has been used to fortify the weakest points. He's watching from a safe distance, scanning the area, when suddenly, the shot rings out. Chaos erupts. The president is unharmed, but a foreign diplomat is dead. And then, before Swagger can even process what's happening, he realizes the trap has already been set. The very moment he spots the sniper's nest, he is surrounded by armed men. Everything happens too fast. Pain explodes in his shoulder as bullets tear through him. His mind races. They're not just trying to capture him. They're trying to kill him. Bleeding and barely conscious, Swagger forces himself to react. He takes down two of the men, grabbing a weapon and escaping into the crowded streets. But he's at a disadvantage, wounded, hunted, and framed for an assassination he didn't commit. The world now believes Bob Lee Swagger is a terrorist. His face is all over the news. Every law enforcement agency in the country is after him. He has no allies, no resources, and nowhere to run. With sheer willpower and survival instincts honed from years in combat, Swagger evades capture, disappearing into the city. He patches himself up, ignoring the searing pain as he prepares for what comes next. He won't just survive. He will find out who set him up, and he will make them pay. While Swagger fights to stay alive, another man begins to question the official story. FBI Special Agent Nick Memphis is part of the team tasked with bringing Swagger in. He is young, ambitious, and believes in the system, but something doesn't sit right with him. The crime scene, the so-called evidence, the way everything was wrapped up too cleanly, it feels wrong. Memphis starts digging. He reviews the footage, studies the ballistic reports, and slowly begins to see the cracks in the official narrative. But the more he questions, the more dangerous his situation becomes. Powerful people do not like questions. Meanwhile, Swagger follows the only lead he has, his own expertise. He knows how snipers work, he knows how they think, and he knows this shot was too perfect, too calculated. A sniper that good? That means military training. That means government connections. Swagger tracks down old contacts, pieces together evidence, and realizes that the conspiracy goes far deeper than just a single frame job. This isn't about an assassination, it's about a cover-up, a secret that certain people are willing to kill for. As the net tightens around him, Swagger prepares for war. He is no longer just running, he is hunting. He will uncover the truth. He will make those responsible pay. And this time, they won't see him coming. The air is thick with tension. Bob Lee Swagger is no longer just a man on the run. He's a man with a mission. They took his name, framed him for a crime he didn't commit, and turned the entire country against him. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated him. Bleeding, hunted, and forced into the shadows, Swagger doesn't waste a second feeling sorry for himself. He knows the truth. The people who set him up are powerful, connected, and prepared for any move he makes. But he also knows something else. There's no such thing as a perfect crime. Somewhere, in the tangled mess of deception and manipulation, there's a loose thread. And once he finds it, he'll pull until everything unravels. With every move, Swagger starts piecing together the puzzle. His first real clue? The bullet. There are only a handful of snipers in the world who could make a shot that clean, that precise. Swagger is one of them. So whoever pulled the trigger had military training, experience, and government backing. The setup wasn't sloppy. It was orchestrated by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate evidence, how to predict security responses, how to ensure that Swagger took the fall. But before he can act, he needs an ally. FBI Special Agent Nick Memphis has been digging into the case. Something about the setup doesn't add up. The crime scene, the ballistic reports, the proof against Swagger, it all feels too clean, too perfect. The deeper Memphis looks, the more he realizes that the people hunting Swagger aren't after justice. They're covering something up. Memphis is young, ambitious, and not willing to let go of the truth. But the closer he gets, the more dangerous things become. One night, he's attacked, dragged into a car, beaten, and warned to stop asking questions. But instead of scaring him away, it does the opposite. Now he knows he's onto something real. Swagger and Memphis finally cross paths. Swagger doesn't trust easily, but he recognizes something in Memphis. He sees a man who isn't bought, who still believes in what's right. And Memphis? He knows Swagger isn't the enemy. The two of them form an uneasy partnership. Swagger provides the experience, the skills, and the knowledge of how assassins operate. Memphis provides the resources, the access, and the connections within law enforcement. Together, they start tearing away the lies. One layer at a time, the conspiracy stretches far beyond a single assassination. Swagger was never meant to survive. The real targets? Witnesses to a brutal massacre overseas, a war crime committed by powerful men who now sit in positions of influence. One name keeps coming up: Senator Charles Meacham. A career politician with deep ties to the military-industrial complex, Meacham has spent his entire career making problems disappear. The assassination was never about the president. It was about silencing someone who knew too much. And Swagger? He was the perfect scapegoat. With the truth finally in his hands, Swagger doesn't go to the authorities. He knows better. The system is rigged, the powerful protect their own, and the moment he steps into a courtroom, he'll either be silenced or thrown into a cell for life. So he does what he does best. He prepares for war. Using Memphis as his inside man, Swagger gathers intelligence, watches movements, and tracks down the operatives involved in framing him. One by one, he hunts them down, extracting information, exposing their crimes, and eliminating the threats standing in his way. The final confrontation is set. A secluded cabin, hidden in the mountains, where it all began, where it all ends. Meacham, Johnson, and the last remaining conspirators gather, thinking they are safe, untouchable. They are wrong. Swagger strikes with surgical precision. A ghost in the night, moving through the darkness like death itself. One by one, he dismantles their security, cutting off escape routes, forcing them into the open. When he finally stands before Meacham and Johnson, the moment is electric. They plead, bargain, try to buy their way out. But Swagger has heard it all before. His response? One final shot. In the aftermath, Swagger does what no one expects. He doesn't run. He walks right into the offices of the FBI, presenting the truth, the evidence, the recordings, the confessions. The government has no choice but to clear his name. But justice? That's another story. Meacham may have been exposed, but men like him don't face consequences. So Swagger pays one last visit, one last bullet, one last reckoning. And then he disappears into the mountains once more. The world may think it's over. But Bob Lee Swagger knows better. There will always be another war, another enemy, another battle to fight. And when the time comes, he'll be ready. Bob Lee Swagger is not just a soldier. He is not just a sniper. He is a man forged by war, betrayed by his country, and forced to become his own justice. From the moment he appears on screen, living in self-imposed exile in the mountains, everything about him screams experience, discipline, and a quiet but deadly intensity. Swagger is a ghost of the battlefield, a man who once lived by duty but has now turned his back on a system he no longer trusts. He doesn't seek trouble, but when it finds him, he knows how to handle it. His life is one of isolation, survival, and a constant lingering awareness that violence never truly leaves a man like him. What makes Swagger such a compelling character is that he is both larger than life and deeply human. His skills are unmatched. His precision as a sniper is borderline supernatural. His instincts are razor-sharp, and his ability to adapt under pressure makes him a formidable opponent. But at his core, he is not invincible. He bleeds, he suffers, he makes mistakes, and he feels the weight of every life he's taken. Underneath his cold exterior is a man carrying the burden of loss. He has seen war up close, lost people he cared about, and been forced to make decisions no human being should ever have to make. But he is not a killer without a conscience. He does not murder for sport, and he does not strike without purpose. Every bullet he fires is calculated, precise, and necessary. Swagger is a classic antihero, the kind of man who doesn't play by the rules because he knows the rules are written by the corrupt. He does not trust easily, and when the government he once served turns against him, he doesn't hesitate to turn his weapons against them. This is what separates him from traditional action heroes. He isn't just fighting to clear his name, he's fighting because he knows the system is broken. But he is not alone in this war. Nick Memphis, the young, ambitious FBI agent who crosses paths with Swagger, is the mirror opposite of him. Where Swagger is hardened by experience, Memphis is still idealistic, believing in the law and the institutions that uphold it. He follows orders, he respects authority, and he wants to do things by the book. At first, he sees Swagger as a criminal, a dangerous man who needs to be stopped. But as he starts peeling back the layers of deception, he realizes the truth. Swagger isn't the villain. He is the victim. Memphis undergoes one of the most important transformations in the film. He starts as a by-the-book agent, someone who believes in justice but hasn't yet seen how the world truly operates. But as he watches powerful men manipulate the system, as he sees how easily they erase their crimes and rewrite history, he is forced to confront the reality of corruption. And the moment he makes that decision, to step out of line, to help Swagger rather than hunt him, he crosses the point of no return. Memphis is not a warrior like Swagger, but he has his own kind of strength. He is intelligent, resourceful, and unwilling to turn a blind eye, even when it puts his own life at risk. His dynamic with Swagger is one of the most compelling aspects of the story. While Swagger operates in the shadows, Memphis is his eyes and ears on the inside, feeding him the information he needs to bring down the conspiracy. In many ways, Memphis represents what Swagger once was, an idealist who believed in the system, who wanted to serve his country with honor. But by the end of the film, Memphis is forever changed. He no longer trusts blindly. He has seen how easily truth can be buried. And like Swagger, he is ready to fight back. But every hero needs a worthy villain. And that villain is Senator Charles Meacham. Meacham is not a man who pulls the trigger himself. He doesn't need to. He is the kind of powerful figure who has others do his dirty work, operating from the shadows, orchestrating deaths, cover-ups, and political manipulations with chilling ease. He is not physically imposing, nor is he a man of action. But what makes him terrifying is that he doesn't need brute force. He has influence, and influence is deadlier than any weapon. Meacham is the embodiment of systemic corruption. He has spent his entire career turning wars into profits, soldiers into pawns, and morality into an inconvenience. To him, swagger is nothing more than a disposable asset, a tool that outlived its usefulness. What makes Meacham's presence so disturbing is how effortless his evil is. When confronted with the truth, he doesn't deny it. He doesn't beg. He smirks, because he knows the world works in his favor. He has seen men like Swagger before, men who think the truth matters, men who believe justice still exists. And he has watched them all disappear. But what Meacham underestimates is Swagger's determination. Unlike the others, Swagger is not afraid to play by his own rules. He doesn't want money, he doesn't want a deal, and he doesn't want to walk away quietly. He wants justice, not the kind written in laws, but the kind that comes from the barrel of a rifle. And in the end, that is exactly what Meacham gets. The final confrontation between Swagger and Meacham is not a gunfight. It's not a chase. It is one man standing before another, with nothing left to hide behind. Swagger gives him a choice: to confess, to face the consequences, or to die knowing that his sins will not be forgiven. And Meacham, ever the man of power, still believes he is untouchable. That arrogance is his downfall. Because Bob Lee Swagger is not the kind of man who leaves loose ends. And so, as the last bullet finds its mark, Meacham's reign of corruption ends, not in a courtroom, not in a scandal, but in the only way it ever could. Swagger, Memphis, and Meacham represent three different aspects of justice. Swagger is vengeance, the kind of justice that doesn't wait for permission. Memphis is morality, the belief that truth matters, even when the system says otherwise. Meacham is corruption, the reality of unchecked power, the men who make the rules and rewrite them when necessary. By the time the dust settles, none of them are the same as when they started. Memphis has lost his naivety but gained something far more important: clarity. Meacham has lost everything because he believed he was untouchable. And Swagger? He walks away, a man with no home, no country, but still standing. Because men like Bob Lee Swagger don't fade away. They watch. They wait. And when the time comes, they strike. From the moment Shooter began production, it was destined to be more than just another action thriller. With its meticulous attention to detail, gripping performances, and intense action sequences, the film stood out as a high-caliber entry in the genre. But behind the camera, the making of Shooter was just as thrilling, unpredictable, and full of surprises as the movie itself. From painful injuries and real-life sniper training to unexpected production challenges and hidden trivia, there are strange and fascinating facts that make Shooter even more compelling when you dig deeper. One of the most impressive aspects of the film was Mark Wahlberg's transformation into Bob Lee Swagger. Wahlberg wasn't just handed a script and expected to play the role. He was thrown into intensive sniper training, learning firsthand what it takes to be a military marksman. To prepare, he worked closely with real-life Marine snipers, spending weeks understanding ballistics, long-range shooting, wind compensation, and the extreme discipline required to be an elite sniper. He didn't just learn how to shoot, he learned how to think like a sniper. In one interview, Wahlberg described the intense physical and mental preparation required for the role. He spent hours at the shooting range, hitting targets from incredible distances using real sniper rifles. The trainers didn't go easy on him either. They put him through military-style drills, ensuring that he could handle the weaponry with the same confidence as a trained Marine. One of the most surprising details about his training was how Wahlberg had to learn about holdover, the technique snipers use to adjust for bullet drop at long distances. One of the most surprising details about his training was how Wahlberg had to learn about holdover, the technique snipers use to adjust for bullet drop at long distances. Unlike in most movies where bullets magically hit their targets, Shooter aimed for realism, so Wahlberg had to understand the science behind every shot. And it wasn't just about marksmanship. Wahlberg also had to endure intense physical training to convincingly portray a former Marine who could survive on the run while being hunted by the government. This meant undergoing a brutal fitness regimen, including endurance exercises, weight training, and tactical drills. He was pushed to his limits, ensuring that when Swagger was running, fighting, or recovering from injuries in the film, Wahlberg could perform as authentically as possible. But Wahlberg wasn't the only one who took preparation seriously. The production team was determined to make the sniper scenes feel as real as possible, leading to an unexpected encounter with the real U.S. Marine Corps. During one of the training sessions, the film's crew brought in a real sniper rifle, along with some of the top marksmen in the world to ensure everything was as accurate as possible. At one point, a Marine sniper who was consulting on the film set up a shot so precise that it stunned everyone on set. The distance? Over a mile away. The target? A tiny metal plate. The result? A perfect hit. Everyone on set stood in stunned silence, realizing just how terrifyingly accurate elite snipers really are. That dedication to realism carried over into the film's action sequences, which presented their own unique set of challenges and unexpected moments. Take, for example, the scene where Bob Lee Swagger is badly wounded and has to use unconventional methods to patch himself up. One of the most painful yet accurate moments in the film is when Swagger uses sugar to disinfect a gunshot wound. This isn't just Hollywood fiction. Sugar has antibacterial properties and has been used historically as a field dressing for open wounds. The decision to include this detail came from military consultants on set, who wanted to showcase just how resourceful snipers have to be when stranded without medical supplies. And then there was the unforgettable moment when Wahlberg's dedication to realism went too far. During a particularly grueling scene, Wahlberg was running at full speed through rough terrain, trying to escape his pursuers. The ground was uneven, and the weather had created a slippery mess of mud and rocks. One wrong step, and Wahlberg twisted his ankle so badly that production had to shut down for the day. But rather than taking time off, Wahlberg insisted on continuing the shoot the next morning. His ankle was heavily swollen, but he refused to let it slow him down, pushing through the pain to complete his scenes. Another bizarre and unexpected moment during production happened while filming the mountain shootout scene. The crew had carefully planned the trajectory of every gunfight, mapping out where explosions would occur and where the actors needed to move. However, on the day of shooting, the controlled explosions malfunctioned, going off earlier than planned. Wahlberg and the stunt team were forced to dive for cover, completely unscripted, creating a moment that was so real that it ended up being used in the final cut of the film. Beyond the intense physical demands and challenges, Shooter also hid several subtle details and Easter eggs throughout the film. For example, some of the sniper rifles used in the film were replicas of weapons used by real-life Marine Corps snipers. The film's armory department worked closely with military consultants to ensure that every weapon was historically accurate. Another interesting detail: the number of shots Swagger fires throughout the film matches real-life sniper engagements. In Hollywood, action movies often show snipers firing rapid shots, hitting targets without adjusting. But in Shooter, Swagger follows real sniper protocols, waiting, adjusting for wind, and taking only the necessary shots. Even the conspiracy elements in the film have roots in real-life military cover-ups. Several plot points, including the government's role in staging assassinations, using snipers as scapegoats, and erasing evidence, were loosely inspired by declassified military operations. One particularly eerie coincidence? The film's portrayal of shadowy government operatives manipulating events to silence whistleblowers bore a striking resemblance to real-life political scandals that emerged years later. Even Wahlberg himself has commented on how unnervingly close some of the film's conspiracies were to real-world events. And then there's the final scene, a moment that almost didn't make it into the film. Originally, Shooter was supposed to end on a different note, leaving the audience with more ambiguity. But after reviewing test screenings, the filmmakers decided that Swagger's revenge against the corrupt senator needed to be more definitive. The ending was rewritten and reshot, turning it into one of the most satisfying conclusions in action movie history. Looking back at the making of Shooter, it's clear that this wasn't just another action movie. It was a project fueled by precision, authenticity, and a relentless commitment to realism. From real Marine snipers advising on set to Wahlberg's grueling training, on-set injuries, and unscripted moments making it into the final cut, every aspect of Shooter was shaped by dedication to detail and a love for the craft of action filmmaking. And for those who watch the film knowing these strange and fascinating facts, it becomes even more thrilling to experience. Because behind every sniper shot, every explosion, and every calculated move that Bob Lee Swagger makes, there's a true story of grit, perseverance, and cinematic excellence. From the moment Shooter begins, there is a palpable sense of tension that grips the audience. The film is not just about gunfights, snipers, and political conspiracies. It's about betrayal, morality, and what happens when the truth becomes a liability. Every event in the film, from the first sniper shot to the final act of retribution, is loaded with layers of meaning, subtext, and critical commentary on power, corruption, and justice. At the center of it all is Bob Lee Swagger, a character who embodies both the best and worst aspects of the American war machine. He is a highly trained warrior, a man whose skills are unmatched, but he is also a discarded soldier, left behind by the very system he once served. This conflict within Swagger is the foundation of the film's thematic weight. One of the most crucial and revealing events in Shooter is the moment Swagger is framed. Up until this point, the film presents Swagger as an isolated but capable man, a former Marine who just wants to live in peace. He has rejected the government that betrayed him, retreating into the wilderness, far from the corruption of the modern world. But when Colonel Isaac Johnson arrives at his cabin, asking for his help in preventing an assassination, Swagger is pulled back into a game that was rigged from the start. From a critical standpoint, this moment speaks volumes about the way institutions manipulate soldiers. Johnson presents Swagger with a noble mission, protecting the president, saving lives, serving his country once more. But in reality, Swagger is being used, his skills turned against him, his knowledge exploited for a crime that was planned long before he was even involved. This moment is particularly impactful because it mirrors real-world cases of military figures being scapegoated by governments. History has seen countless cases where the truth was buried under layers of deception, and soldiers were forced to take the fall for crimes orchestrated by those in power. Swagger's framing is not just a clever plot twist, it's a statement. It exposes how those in control can manufacture narratives, manipulate the media, and paint heroes as villains. The very government Swagger once served turns against him, using its vast resources to hunt him down. In this moment, he ceases to be a soldier and becomes a fugitive. This shift in Swagger's role fundamentally changes the trajectory of the film. He is no longer just a highly skilled Marine. He is a man at war with the very institution that created him. And that makes him far more dangerous than they ever anticipated. One of the most compelling sequences in the film comes when Swagger starts piecing together the truth. Rather than simply running, he uses his military training, tactical thinking, and deep understanding of sniper strategy to turn the tables. This is where Shooter distinguishes itself from generic action films. It doesn't rely on mindless shootouts or explosions for the sake of spectacle. Instead, it grounds its action in intelligence, logic, and precision. Every move Swagger makes is calculated, every shot is deliberate, and every action he takes is driven by his ultimate goal, to expose the corruption that nearly destroyed him. One particularly powerful and underrated scene occurs when Swagger forces one of the conspirators to confess. This moment is brutal, intense, and deeply significant. The audience sees Swagger not just as a soldier, but as a man who has been pushed to the edge. He is not torturing out of revenge. He is doing it to get the truth, to make sure the people responsible are held accountable. From a critical perspective, this scene forces the audience to question morality in war. Asterisk, at what point does a soldier stop being a protector and become an executioner? Asterisk, if justice is impossible through legal means, does taking matters into one's own hands become justified? This ethical dilemma is what makes Swagger such a compelling protagonist. He is not a hero in the traditional sense. He is a man seeking justice in a world where justice does not exist. The conspiracy at the heart of Shooter is not just a backdrop for action. It is a commentary on how power corrupts, how political leaders exploit war for personal gain, and how those who refuse to play along are eliminated. The true villain of the film, Senator Meacham, is not a man of action. He doesn't wield a gun, he doesn't fight in battles. He manipulates, controls, and decides who lives and who dies from behind closed doors. He is the embodiment of systemic corruption. When Meacham smugly tells Swagger that justice is an illusion, that men like him will always control the world, it is one of the film's most chilling moments. Because the most terrifying villains are not the ones who fight in the streets. They are the ones who make the rules, bend the laws, and rewrite history to serve their interests. This scene lands with an even heavier weight when Swagger finally confronts Meacham in the final act. The climax of Shooter is not a traditional battle. It is a moment of reckoning. Meacham, still believing himself untouchable, does not beg for his life. He does not apologize. Instead, he laughs. Because he believes that Swagger cannot win. That no matter what he does, the system will always protect the powerful. This moment is both enraging and terrifying. It forces the audience to consider just how much control the wealthy and corrupt truly have. And then, Swagger does the only thing that makes sense. One final bullet. This is not about revenge. It is about ensuring that evil does not walk away unpunished. From a cinematic and storytelling perspective, this moment is brilliant because it does not give the audience a traditional Hollywood ending. Swagger does not return to a normal life. He does not get a medal. He does not receive justice in the way we are used to seeing in movies. Instead, he simply walks away. Because he understands what the audience now understands, the fight is never truly over. The impact of Shooter goes beyond its action sequences. It is a film that forces the audience to question power, corruption, and the reality of justice. It leaves us with an uneasy feeling. Because, unlike many action films, it does not pretend that the world is fair. And that is what makes it unforgettable. The making of Shooter was just as intense, calculated, and meticulous as the film itself. Every frame, every shot, and every sequence was crafted with a level of precision that reflected the skills of its protagonist, Bob Lee Swagger. But behind the camera, the journey to bring the film to life was filled with unexpected challenges, fascinating details, and stories that prove just how much work went into making the action and realism feel as authentic as possible. From the very beginning, the filmmakers knew that Shooter couldn't be just another action film. It needed to feel real, not just in its gunfights and sniper sequences but in the way the world functioned around its characters. To achieve that, they sought out experts in military tactics, sniper operations, and real-world government conspiracies. The team consulted with former military snipers who had experienced combat, learning firsthand about the physical and mental discipline required for long-range shooting. These experts explained everything from how snipers adjust for wind resistance and bullet drop to how they remain motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect shot. The smallest details mattered. The way a sniper breathes, the way they handle their rifle, the way they blend into their surroundings, every aspect of their craft had to be accurately portrayed on screen. Mark Wahlberg, who took on the role of Bob Lee Swagger, wasn't given the luxury of simply acting like a sniper. He had to become one. He underwent an intensive training program that included live-fire exercises, distance shooting, and survival tactics. He trained with real Marine snipers who pushed him to the limit, forcing him to develop the patience and precision required to take down a target from extreme distances. By the time filming began, Wahlberg was so well-versed in handling a sniper rifle that he could confidently hit long-distance targets with remarkable accuracy. He even admitted in interviews that his respect for real snipers grew immensely during the process, realizing just how much skill and control goes into making a single perfect shot. One of the most incredible aspects of Wahlberg's training was that he had to learn to shoot using different techniques depending on the environment. The film's locations varied from dense forests to urban rooftops to vast, open landscapes where wind conditions could drastically affect a bullet's trajectory. The trainers made sure Wahlberg understood how to adjust his aim based on these factors, just as a real sniper would. There were moments on set where Wahlberg would naturally fall into the stance of a trained marksman without even thinking about it, his body reacting instinctively after months of practice. The production team also paid close attention to the types of weapons used in the film. They didn't just hand out generic action movie firearms. Instead, they selected specific rifles based on real-world sniper gear. Bob Lee Swagger's main weapon, a custom-built sniper rifle, was carefully chosen to reflect the type of precision a Marine sniper would require. The way the rifle was handled, cleaned, and maintained was all done with accuracy in mind. In fact, some of the weapons used in the film were so authentic that they had to be carefully managed on set to comply with strict firearm regulations. One of the most surprising challenges the filmmakers faced was shooting the long-range sniper scenes. In traditional action movies, sniper shots are often depicted unrealistically, with bullets traveling in a straight line and hitting targets instantly. But in reality, sniping is far more complex. A bullet fired from extreme distances takes time to reach its target, and factors like gravity, wind, and atmospheric conditions all come into play. The team worked closely with military consultants to ensure that every sniper kill in the film looked and felt realistic. The visual effects team used real physics calculations to simulate the bullet's trajectory, making sure that even the way a bullet impacted a target was scientifically accurate. One of the most intense days of filming took place during the mountain sniper sequence. The crew had to shoot in harsh weather conditions, dealing with freezing temperatures and unpredictable winds. Wahlberg, committed to making the scene as real as possible, refused to use a body double for most of the sequences. He crawled through the rough terrain, took real shots at distant targets, and endured the elements just like a real sniper would. At one point, the wind was so strong that it nearly threw off the camera rig, forcing the team to pause filming until conditions stabilized. But rather than complaining, Wahlberg took it as another challenge, using the downtime to go through more tactical drills with the military advisors on set. There was another moment during filming that stood out to the crew. The scene where Swagger performs field surgery on himself after being shot was one of the most difficult to execute. The film's medical consultants wanted the moment to feel as brutal and real as possible, so they advised Wahlberg on how a sniper would handle a wound under those conditions. One of the key details they included was the use of sugar as an antiseptic. Most audiences watching the film might assume this was a Hollywood invention, but in reality, sugar has been used in battlefield medicine to prevent infections. The decision to include this detail added another layer of realism to Swagger's survival skills. Beyond the technical challenges, the production was also filled with unexpected and sometimes humorous moments. Danny Glover, who played the corrupt Senator Meacham, had a habit of breaking character between takes, cracking jokes and making the crew laugh right before delivering some of his most sinister lines. His ability to switch from a charming, joking personality to a cold, calculating villain was so seamless that even Wahlberg admitted it was unsettling at times. Glover later said that playing a corrupt politician came almost too naturally, given how much real-world material he had to draw from. Michael Peña, who played FBI agent Nick Memphis, also brought a level of light-heartedness to the set. Known for his comedic timing, Peña would often improvise lines just to see if he could get Wahlberg to break character. One of his ad-libs during a serious interrogation scene caught Wahlberg so off guard that he actually had to turn away from the camera to avoid laughing. Despite the humor off-camera, Peña took his role seriously, studying real FBI tactics to make sure that his portrayal felt authentic. The ending of the film underwent several changes before the final version was decided. Originally, the filmmakers considered a more traditional resolution, where Swagger would expose the conspiracy through legal means and walk away vindicated. But as the script evolved, they realized that such an ending would feel disingenuous given the themes of the film. Instead, they opted for a more satisfying, justice-driven conclusion, where Swagger delivers his own form of retribution against Meacham and the corrupt officials responsible for the conspiracy. This decision made the ending more impactful, reinforcing the film's underlying message that sometimes the system isn't designed to deliver justice. It has to be taken. Looking back on the production, Shooter stands as a testament to the dedication and hard work of everyone involved. From the meticulous attention to military accuracy to the intense physical demands placed on its lead actor, the film is a masterclass in blending realism with high-stakes storytelling. Every detail, from the way Swagger handles his rifle to the way bullets behave in different conditions, was crafted with the goal of making the audience feel immersed in the world of an elite sniper on the run. Even years after its release, the film remains one of the most respected action thrillers of its time. It doesn't rely on flashy, unrealistic gunfights or over-the-top action sequences. Instead, it builds tension through strategy, precision, and a gripping story of betrayal and revenge. And for those who know the effort that went into making it as authentic as possible, Shooter becomes even more impressive. Behind every sniper shot, every chase sequence, and every moment of survival is a team of filmmakers, actors, and military consultants who worked tirelessly to bring the world of Bob Lee Swagger to life. The world of Shooter is not just built through its characters and story, but through the very landscapes that shape Bob Lee Swagger's journey. Every location, every backdrop, and every carefully crafted frame plays a role in enhancing the film's tension, realism, and emotional weight. From the vast isolation of the mountains to the suffocating urban environments, each setting serves as more than just a place. It becomes an extension of the story, reflecting the internal struggles of its protagonist and the corruption that lurks beneath the surface. It all begins in the mountains. Swagger's secluded cabin in Wyoming is a place of self-imposed exile, a retreat from the world that betrayed him. Surrounded by towering peaks, untouched forests, and the kind of silence that only comes from being miles away from civilization, this setting is not just about physical distance. It represents his desire to escape from the system that once used him. The cabin, small and unassuming, is filled with practical tools of survival, the kind of place where a man lives not because he wants to, but because he has nowhere else to go. The cinematography here is slow and deliberate, with long, wide shots that emphasize his isolation. The cold color palette, the lack of vibrant life, the muted tones, it all reinforces the idea that Swagger is a man without a home, a ghost of a soldier waiting for a war that never truly ended. When Colonel Johnson arrives at the cabin, the contrast is immediate. Swagger, dressed in simple clothes, looks out of place next to the clean-cut, suit-wearing operative. The cabin, small and unassuming, is filled with practical tools of survival, the kind of place where a man lives not because he wants to, but because he has nowhere else to go. The cinematography here is slow and deliberate, with long, wide shots that emphasize his isolation. The cold color palette, the lack of vibrant life, the muted tones, it all reinforces the idea that Swagger is a man without a home, a ghost of a soldier waiting for a war that never truly ended. When Colonel Johnson arrives at the cabin, the contrast is immediate. Swagger, dressed in simple clothes, looks out of place next to the clean-cut, suit-wearing operative. The SUV that brings Johnson and his men up the mountain is the first invasion of civilization into Swagger's world. The camera subtly shifts from wide, open shots to tighter, more confined angles as Johnson speaks, signaling that Swagger's space is closing in on him, that the outside world is pulling him back whether he wants it or not. The lighting in this scene is natural and soft, but the shadows cast by the mountains add a quiet foreboding, foreshadowing the trap that is already in motion. Once Swagger leaves the safety of his mountain home, the world around him changes drastically. The urban setting of Philadelphia, where the assassination attempt takes place, is the polar opposite of the stillness of the mountains. The streets are crowded, the buildings tower over him, and the walls seem to close in. This shift in location is not just a change in scenery, it is a complete shift in atmosphere. Swagger, who thrives in open spaces where he can control his surroundings, is now boxed in, surrounded by concrete, cameras, and forces he cannot see. The cinematography mirrors this change, with the camera moving in quicker cuts, handheld shots creating a sense of instability, and the color grading becoming slightly desaturated, giving the city a cold, unfriendly feel. When the assassination takes place, chaos erupts, and the setting becomes a trap. The way the scene is filmed is crucial in conveying Swagger's sudden realization that he has been set up. The camera becomes erratic, shifting between Swagger's perspective, where everything is moving too fast to process, and the methodical execution of the frame job by the conspirators. The way the sniper shot is captured, through careful build-up, slow-motion elements, and then immediate, sharp chaos, mirrors Swagger's mind in that moment. He has spent his life anticipating shots, preparing for impact, but this time he is caught off guard. The setting plays into this deception, making the city feel more like a hunting ground where Swagger is the prey. As he escapes, wounded and on the run, the world around him turns from a structured, controlled urban space to a disorienting maze. The cinematography here shifts again. The camera gets closer, tighter, more desperate. The lighting in the alleyways and backstreets creates long shadows, emphasizing the paranoia creeping into Swagger's reality. At one point, the only lights come from flickering street lamps and flashing police sirens, bathing the scene in red and blue, colors that symbolize danger and the looming presence of authority. These small details make the setting feel alive, reacting to Swagger's predicament rather than just existing as a backdrop. Then comes the rural hideout. As Swagger escapes the city, he moves through desolate roads, abandoned barns, and run-down safehouses, places that reflect his growing detachment from the world. Unlike his mountain retreat, which was isolated but peaceful, these new locations feel temporary, unstable, and desperate. The cinematography here shifts to longer, handheld takes, making the audience feel the exhaustion, the weight of each decision, the relentless pursuit closing in. The colors become more muted, the environment harsher. He is no longer hiding in a peaceful place, he is surviving in the margins. The setting reaches one of its most crucial points when Swagger meets Nick Memphis, the FBI agent who starts to realize that the official story doesn't add up. Their meeting takes place in a nondescript, forgotten corner of the world, an old, run-down gas station, the kind of place no one notices. This location is not accidental. It represents the kind of space where truth is hidden, where real conversations happen away from surveillance and control. The cinematography in this scene slows down again, emphasizing stillness and conversation rather than action. The lighting is subdued, the color grading leans toward earthy tones, signaling a shift in Swagger's arc. He is no longer just running, he is planning. As the film builds toward its climax, the settings take on an even more symbolic weight. The final confrontation with Senator Meacham takes place in a grand, luxurious estate, a place of power, wealth, and untouchability. This location was chosen deliberately to contrast Swagger's world with the world of the corrupt elite. The mansion is pristine, filled with expensive art and furniture, a place where decisions that alter the course of history are made behind closed doors. The cinematography here becomes more controlled, more polished, as if to reflect the illusion of order that men like Meacham believe they maintain. The contrast is stark. Swagger, a man forged in the dirt and blood of war, standing in a world built on lies and stolen power. The way this final scene is filmed is crucial. The camera lingers on Meacham's smug confidence, the subtle smirk of a man who believes he is invincible. But the lighting in the room tells another story. Shadows creep in from the edges, the warm glow of the room undercut by the cold reality that justice has finally arrived. When Swagger pulls the trigger, the setting itself feels like it exhales, as if the very walls of the mansion are acknowledging that a reckoning has taken place. By the time the film reaches its final moments, the settings have come full circle. Swagger, once again, finds himself in the wilderness, walking away into the vast open landscape where no system can reach him. But the difference is clear. He is not hiding anymore. The cinematography in this final shot is wide, expansive, almost freeing. The mountains, once symbols of isolation, now feel like a place of finality, of acceptance, of a man who has reclaimed his life. The color palette is warmer than before, as if to suggest that while Swagger will never truly escape his past, he has at least found his own version of peace. Throughout Shooter, the settings are not just places where events happen, They are integral to the story, shaping its characters, reinforcing its themes, and immersing the audience in Swagger's journey. The cinematography, lighting, and color grading work together to make each environment feel distinct, alive, and meaningful. Every shadow, every wide-open landscape, every confined city street tells its own story, making the film not just an action thriller, but a visually rich, emotionally gripping experience. And by the time Swagger disappears into the horizon, the audience feels the weight of every step he has taken, every battle fought, and every truth uncovered, all reflected in the world around him. Filming Shooter was just as intense, unpredictable, and action-packed as the story itself. The set was a place where real military training met high-stakes filmmaking, where actors pushed themselves to the limit, and where unexpected challenges tested the crew's ability to adapt. But behind all the precision and gritty realism, there were also moments of humor. Filming Shooter was just as intense, unpredictable, and action-packed as the story itself. The set was a place where real military training met high-stakes filmmaking, where actors pushed themselves to the limit, and where unexpected challenges tested the crew's ability to adapt. But behind all the precision and gritty realism, there were also moments of humor, camaraderie, and sheer determination that made the production a journey worth remembering. From the very start, Mark Wahlberg knew that playing Bob Lee Swagger was going to be more than just another action role. Unlike many Hollywood stars who rely heavily on stunt doubles, Wahlberg insisted on doing as much of the physical action himself as possible. That meant months of sniper training, grueling physical preparation, and learning how to handle weapons with the skill of a Marine. Wahlberg didn't just want to look like a sniper, he wanted to think, move, and react like one. His dedication was so intense that during one of his training sessions with real Marine snipers, he hit a target over 800 yards away on his first try. The military consultants on set were impressed, joking that if Wahlberg ever wanted to switch careers, he might have a future as a marksman. But despite his natural talent, there were still moments where he was reminded that playing a sniper in a movie was very different from being one in real life. One of those moments came when the team was filming a sequence where Swagger is forced to run through a rugged mountain landscape after being wounded. Wahlberg, fully committed to authenticity, insisted on carrying all of his character's gear while running full speed across rocky terrain. But what he didn't anticipate was how unforgiving the terrain would be. After a few takes, he tripped over loose rocks and went down hard, twisting his ankle and scraping his arms. The director called for a break, but Wahlberg, determined to finish the scene, got back up and kept running. By the end of the day, his bruises and cuts were real, adding to the grittiness of the performance. Another unexpected challenge came during the filming of the sniper assassination scene in Philadelphia. The crew had spent weeks carefully planning the logistics of filming in a public area with real crowds nearby. Even though security was tight and the film had full permits, many people walking by had no idea that a major Hollywood production was happening. When Wahlberg was seen running through the streets in tattered clothing, covered in fake blood, several concerned pedestrians actually called the police, believing a real shooting had occurred. The production had to pause while the situation was explained to local law enforcement, and Wahlberg later laughed about how convincing the scene must have looked to people who didn't know a movie was being filmed. Despite the film's serious tone, the atmosphere on set was often light-hearted. Wahlberg and Michael Peña, who played FBI agent Nick Memphis, quickly developed a dynamic that translated seamlessly to their performances. Off-camera, Peña was known for cracking jokes between takes, sometimes right before serious scenes, just to see if he could break Wahlberg's focus. One time, right before an intense interrogation scene, Peña whispered an improvised joke under his breath, catching Wahlberg so off guard that he had to turn away from the camera to keep from laughing. The director, while amused, reminded Peña to save the comedy for later. Danny Glover, who played the corrupt Senator Meacham, also brought a unique energy to the set. Known for his deep, commanding voice and serious performances, Glover would often slip into character between takes, delivering sinister monologues to unsuspecting crew members. But as soon as the camera stopped rolling, he would crack a smile and joke about how much fun he was having playing a villain. Wahlberg later admitted that Glover was so convincing in his role that there were moments when even he felt intimidated. Another major challenge the crew faced was the realism of the sniper sequences. Unlike many action films that rely on exaggerated gunfights, Shooter aimed to depict sniper tactics as accurately as possible. That meant every shot had to be meticulously planned, every distance calculated, and every bullet trajectory mapped out with scientific precision. For one of the film's most breathtaking long-range shots, where Swagger eliminates a target from over a mile away, the filmmakers wanted to show exactly how a sniper makes such a difficult shot. They worked with real military snipers to ensure that the calculations for wind speed, bullet drop, and atmospheric conditions were all correct. In fact, many of the complex equations seen in Swagger's notes during the film were authentic sniper calculations, carefully written to reflect what a real marksman would use. But sometimes, reality proved to be even more impressive than fiction. One of the military consultants on set, a former Marine sniper, decided to demonstrate just how accurate real snipers could be. With the entire cast and crew watching, he took a rifle and set up a shot at an extreme distance, over 1,000 yards. In one attempt, he hit the target dead center. The silence that followed was only broken by one crew member whispering, "Well, now we know who's really the best shooter here." The production wasn't without its logistical challenges. Shooting in multiple locations across different terrains required constant adjustments to lighting, camera angles, and special effects. The final confrontation at Senator Meacham's mansion was particularly difficult to film. The scene had to be choreographed so that every shot fired, every movement, and every camera angle captured Swagger's precision and control. The mansion itself, an elegant and cold symbol of power, was chosen deliberately to contrast Swagger's rugged, battle-worn existence. One of the final scenes of the film, where Swagger delivers justice in his own way, was rewritten multiple times. The original ending was supposed to be more ambiguous, leaving Swagger's fate uncertain. But after test screenings, the filmmakers decided that the audience needed a more definitive sense of closure. They res-hot the scene, making it clear that Swagger wasn't just walking away, he was ensuring that corruption wouldn't escape unchecked. Looking back, the making of Shooter was a journey just as intense as the film itself. It was a production that pushed its actors, challenged its crew, and demanded a level of authenticity that few action films strive for. Wahlberg's commitment to realism, Peña's comedic timing, Glover's commanding presence, and the expertise of the military consultants all came together to create a film that felt as sharp and precise as the bullets Swagger fires. Even years after its release, those who worked on Shooter remember it as an experience like no other. The combination of methodical planning, real-world expertise, and unexpected on-set surprises made it a film that wasn't just about action. It was about craftsmanship, dedication, and the pursuit of telling a story that felt truly authentic. Whether it was Wahlberg running through Rocky Mountains with real injuries, or a Marine sniper casually hitting impossible shots between takes, Shooter was a production where every detail mattered, every shot counted, and every moment behind the scenes was just as thrilling as what ended up on screen. At first glance, Shooter may seem like just another action-packed thriller, a story about a highly skilled sniper on the run, hunting down the men who framed him. Whether it was Wahlberg running through Rocky Mountains with real injuries, or a Marine sniper casually hitting impossible shots between takes, Shooter was a production where every detail mattered, every shot counted, and every moment behind the scenes was just as thrilling as what ended up on screen. At first glance, Shooter may seem like just another action-packed thriller, a story about a highly skilled sniper on the run, hunting down the men who framed him. But beneath the surface, the film carries layers of meaning, exploring deep themes of betrayal, corruption, morality, and justice. Every action, every setting, every confrontation is infused with symbolism that enhances the story and gives it a weight beyond just bullets and explosions. At the heart of the film lies the theme of betrayal. Bob Lee Swagger is a man who has given everything to his country. He has fought in wars, survived impossible missions, and carried the burden of being one of the best snipers in the world. And yet, despite his loyalty, despite his service, he is discarded like a pawn in a much bigger game. When Colonel Johnson recruits him under the pretense of preventing an assassination, Swagger walks into what seems like a noble mission, only to realize too late that he was never meant to succeed. He was meant to be the fall guy. This moment of betrayal sets the entire story into motion and reinforces a much larger idea. Those in power do not care about the soldiers who serve them. Swagger represents the kind of man who operates with honor, discipline, and a belief in doing what is right. But the system he once trusted does not operate on those same principles. The people pulling the strings, Senator Meacham, Colonel Johnson, and the secretive organizations behind them, are not fighting for country or justice. They fight for power, for money, for control. This betrayal mirrors real-life stories of war veterans who return home only to find themselves abandoned, forgotten, or used as scapegoats. Swagger's journey becomes a metaphor for what happens when someone who has been trained to be a weapon is suddenly seen as disposable. He is not just fighting to clear his name. He is fighting against a system that discards its heroes when they are no longer useful. The film also heavily explores the theme of corruption. Every institution in Shooter is compromised: the government, law enforcement, the military-industrial complex. There are no true good guys in the positions of power, only people who manipulate, lie, and cover up their crimes. Senator Meacham is the perfect embodiment of this corruption. He does not get his hands dirty. He does not fire guns or engage in physical combat. Instead, he operates from the safety of his wealth and political connections, ensuring that every crime committed in his name is hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy and deceit. He believes in absolute control, not through brute force, but through the power of perception and influence. This idea is reinforced through symbolism in the settings. While Swagger spends much of the film in rugged, natural environments, forests, mountains, abandoned hideouts, Meacham exists in luxury. His world is made of glass towers, expensive suits, and high-powered meetings behind closed doors. These two environments serve as a contrast, showing the stark divide between those who fight wars and those who profit from them. But Shooter is not just about corruption, it is about justice. Or rather, the lack of it. Throughout the film, Swagger learns that justice, as it exists in the legal system, is an illusion. Every attempt to expose the truth through official channels is met with resistance, cover-ups, and threats. When he tries to clear his name, he is hunted. When he tries to prove that he was framed, the system doubles down on making sure he is eliminated. The law is not there to protect people like him, it is there to protect people like Meacham. And so, Swagger is forced to take justice into his own hands. This brings up one of the most powerful thematic questions in the film. When the system fails, is vengeance justified? Swagger is not a man who seeks violence without reason. Every move he makes is calculated, every action deliberate. He does not kill for revenge. He kills because he knows that the men he is after will never face consequences unless he is the one to deliver them. His decision to execute Meacham in the final scene is not just an act of revenge, it is an act of restoring balance. If he allowed Meacham to live, he would continue his corruption, continue destroying lives, continue escaping justice. By pulling the trigger, Swagger does what the legal system cannot. He enforces justice, not in a courtroom, but in the only way the world has left him. This moment is the ultimate representation of the film's stance on morality in a perfect world. Criminals like Meacham would be arrested, tried, and sentenced for their crimes. But Shooter does not take place in a perfect world. It takes place in a world where the corrupt thrive, where the powerful protect themselves, and where men like Swagger are hunted instead of honored. The use of visual symbolism throughout the film reinforces these themes. One of the most notable recurring symbols is the sniper rifle itself. The rifle represents power, precision, and control. In the hands of Swagger, it is a tool of justice, used to eliminate those who abuse their authority. In the hands of his enemies, it is a weapon of manipulation, used to assassinate and frame innocent people. There is also strong symbolism in Swagger's physical transformation. At the beginning of the film, he is clean-cut, disciplined, and prepared. But as he is hunted, betrayed, and forced to fight for survival, his appearance changes. He becomes unshaven, wounded, covered in dirt and scars. This physical change reflects his internal transformation. He is no longer the man who once trusted the system. He has become something else. The film's color palette and lighting choices also reinforce its themes. Early scenes in the mountains are bathed in natural light, open landscapes, and earthy tones. These settings represent freedom, isolation, and the purity of nature. As Swagger enters the world of political corruption, the lighting shifts. The interiors of government buildings, interrogation rooms, and secret meetings are all cold, sterile, and artificially lit. Shadows are used strategically to show how truth is always hidden, how power thrives in secrecy. By the time the film reaches its climax, the visual contrast becomes even more extreme. The final confrontation at Meacham's mansion is shot with warm, golden lighting, an environment meant to appear safe, controlled, and untouchable. But beneath that false security lies the reality that corruption does not make men invincible. And when Swagger delivers his final act of justice, the lighting shifts once again. The mansion, once glowing with artificial warmth, becomes cold and lifeless, just as Meacham's influence fades. The film ends with Swagger walking away into the wilderness. This final image ties back to the film's opening, creating a full-circle moment. But now, he is different. At the beginning of the film, the mountains represented a place of retreat, a place where Swagger tried to escape the world. At the end of the film, the mountains represent freedom. Not from war, not from violence, but from the system itself. He knows that he can never return to a normal life. But he also knows that he has done what needed to be done. In the end, Shooter is more than an action film. It is a story about truth in a world built on lies, justice in a world that protects the guilty, and the price of fighting back against forces bigger than any one man. It leaves the audience with an uneasy but powerful message. When the system is broken beyond repair, justice may only come from the barrel of a rifle. From the moment Shooter begins, its filmmaking techniques pull the audience into a world of precision, tension, and raw survival. This is not just an action film. It is a carefully constructed thriller that blends technical accuracy, immersive cinematography, and sound design that amplifies every heartbeat and bullet fired. Every directorial choice, every camera movement, and every edit contributes to the film's sharp, calculated atmosphere, mirroring the mindset of Bob Lee Swagger, a sniper who sees the world in terms of angles, distances, and threats lurking in the shadows. One of the most defining aspects of the film's cinematography is its use of perspective. Director Antoine Fuqua knew that to truly place the audience in Swagger's shoes, the camera had to reflect the way a sniper sees the world, not in chaotic close-ups or frantic handheld movements, but in steady, controlled precision. The sniper's gaze is calculated, aware of every detail, adjusting for movement and environment. The camera follows suit, often utilizing long-range tracking shots and slow zooms that mimic the way a trained shooter locks onto a target. Take, for instance, the film's intense opening sequence, where Swagger and his partner are on a covert mission in Ethiopia. The entire sequence is filmed with deliberate patience, lingering shots, a wide view of the battlefield, and a sense of overwhelming distance. The environment is vast, making Swagger and his spotter feel isolated yet dangerously in control. The use of deep-focus cinematography ensures that the audience is always aware of the distance between Swagger and his targets, reinforcing the power of a sniper who can eliminate enemies without them even knowing he is there. But when Swagger is betrayed and thrown into a world where he is no longer the hunter but the hunted, the cinematography shifts dramatically. The controlled, calculated camera work gives way to a more urgent, disorienting style. During the assassination setup in Philadelphia, the use of handheld cameras, quick cuts, and fragmented perspectives mirrors Swagger's realization that he is being framed. The scene is filled with tight close-ups and shaky movements, creating a sense of paranoia and chaos. The audience is suddenly thrust into his position, not as the composed, distant marksman, but as a man scrambling to survive in a world closing in around him. Lighting plays a crucial role in shaping the film's atmosphere. Natural lighting dominates the early scenes, particularly in Swagger's isolated mountain retreat. The sun casts long shadows over his cabin, emphasizing his loneliness, his detachment from society, and the peace he has found in solitude. But when he is forced back into civilization, the lighting becomes harsher, colder, and artificial. The sterile glow of fluorescent lights in government offices, interrogation rooms, and safe houses creates a sense of detachment and deception. The contrast between the warm, earthy tones of Swagger's refuge and the cold, metallic hues of the city reinforces the film's underlying theme: natural freedom versus manufactured corruption. One of the most remarkable aspects of Shooter is its commitment to realism, particularly in its action sequences and use of practical effects. Unlike many modern action films that rely heavily on CGI, Fuqua insisted on using realistic gunfights, authentic weapons, and accurate ballistic physics. Every shot fired in the film was carefully planned to reflect real-world marksmanship principles. The production team worked closely with military experts to ensure that sniper shots accounted for wind resistance, bullet drop, and trajectory calculations. For example, in the climactic sniper duel near the film's conclusion, Swagger must eliminate his targets from an extreme distance, adjusting for environmental conditions. Instead of relying on unrealistic instant kill shots, the film showcases the complexity of long-range sniping. The camera lingers on Swagger's intense focus, showing his calculations, breathing control, and slight adjustments before pulling the trigger. The bullet's journey is depicted with a mix of slow-motion cinematography and realistic physics, ensuring that each shot feels earned rather than exaggerated. Sound design plays a massive role in creating Shooter's immersive experience. Silence is just as important as sound. Many of the film's most tense moments are not filled with explosions or dramatic music, but with pure, unsettling quiet. When Swagger is preparing a shot, the world around him fades into near silence, allowing the audience to feel the level of concentration required. The sound of his steady breathing, the subtle click of his rifle's safety being disengaged, the distant rustle of wind through trees, these details build suspense in a way that loud action sequences never could. And when the bullets do start flying, the sound is crisp, realistic, and terrifying. Gunfire in Shooter doesn't sound like the exaggerated, overproduced blasts found in many Hollywood films. Each shot is sharp, echoing with weight and impact. The film even captures the slight delay that occurs when firing from extreme distances. The bullet strikes its target before the sound reaches the shooter. This subtle detail adds to the film's authenticity, reminding the audience of the deadly precision of a sniper's world. Editing is another tool used masterfully to control the film's pacing. The early portions of the film, particularly the sequences that establish Swagger's expertise, are edited with longer takes and slower transitions. The film allows the audience to absorb the patience and discipline required for sniping. But once Swagger is on the run, the editing becomes faster, more fragmented, and deliberately chaotic. Scenes are cut rapidly between multiple angles, forcing the viewer into Swagger's state of mind. Rushed, desperate, and constantly assessing threats, one of the most cleverly edited sequences occurs when Swagger treats his own injuries after being shot. The scene intercuts between his agonizing efforts to stop the bleeding and flashbacks to his military training, where he learned survival tactics. This non-linear editing style creates an emotional link between past and present, showing that everything Swagger has endured has prepared him for this moment. The raw, unfiltered depiction of pain makes the audience feel every wound, every struggle, making his survival feel even more hard-earned. While Shooter was a technical triumph, its box office performance was met with mixed reactions. Produced on a budget of $61 million, the film had all the elements of a major Hollywood hit: an established lead actor in Mark Wahlberg, a director known for stylish action films, and a gripping, politically charged plot. However, upon its release in 2007, it faced stiff competition from other blockbuster releases. At the box office, Shooter earned around $95 million worldwide, a respectable but not groundbreaking figure. Domestically, its performance was solid, but it was overseas markets that helped push the film to profitability. Its impact extended beyond the box office. The film's influence led to the creation of a television adaptation, Shooter, the series, starring Ryan Phillip as Bob Lee Swagger. The show expanded on the film's themes and character development, further proving that Swagger's story had lasting appeal. Looking at Shooter today, its filmmaking techniques stand as a masterclass in immersive storytelling. The blend of strategic cinematography, sound design that enhances realism, and editing that controls tension ensures that the film remains engaging from start to finish. Its commitment to practical effects, accurate ballistics, and tactical authenticity separates it from typical Hollywood action films, grounding it in a world that feels as dangerous as it does real. Despite its initial box office numbers, Shooter ultimately became a cult favorite, recognized for its craftsmanship, its gripping narrative, and its bold depiction of justice in a corrupt world. It stands as a film where every shot matters, every decision carries weight, and every moment is built with precision, just like the mind of the sniper at its center. From the moment Shooter hit theaters, its cast became a crucial part of what made the film so compelling. At the center of it all was Mark Wahlberg, taking on the role of Bob Lee Swagger with an intensity that made the audience believe in every bullet fired, every calculated move, and every ounce of betrayal he endured. Wahlberg wasn't just an action star playing a sniper. He immersed himself in the role, undergoing rigorous training and pushing his limits both physically and mentally. When Wahlberg first stepped into Swagger's boots, he knew this character was different. Unlike the brash, confident action heroes seen in other films, Swagger is a man of precision, patience, and discipline. Wahlberg described him as a soldier left behind by the very system he served, forced to navigate a world that no longer has a place for him. To embody this role, he didn't just learn how to hold a rifle. He became a student of the art of sniping. In interviews, Wahlberg spoke about his months of sniper training, working with real Marine snipers who drilled him on accuracy, breathing control, and battlefield survival techniques. He admitted that before filming, he thought long-range shooting was just about aiming and pulling the trigger. But after training, he realized that every shot required mental calculation, patience, and a deep understanding of environmental conditions. Wahlberg recalled one particular training session where he was told to hit a target over 1,000 yards away. His first few shots missed, but once he adjusted for wind and distance, he landed a perfect shot, an experience that gave him a newfound respect for real snipers. But physical preparation was only part of the equation. Wahlberg wanted to tap into Swagger's emotional depth, the pain of betrayal, the weight of survival, and the moral dilemma of justice versus revenge. He explained that playing a character like Swagger required more than just action. It required understanding the psychology of a man who has seen too much and trusts too little. Michael Peña, who played FBI agent Nick Memphis, brought a completely different energy to the set. Peña, known for his comedic timing, initially seemed like an unusual choice for the role of a law enforcement agent. But as soon as cameras rolled, he proved that he could balance intensity with a touch of humor, making Memphis one of the most relatable characters in the film. In interviews, Peña revealed that he had originally auditioned for a much smaller role, but after meeting with director Antoine Fuqua, he was given the part of Memphis instead. He admitted that at first, he was intimidated by the amount of physical training involved. Unlike Wahlberg, who had already worked on several action films, Peña had to quickly learn how to handle firearms and perform tactical maneuvers convincingly. But rather than trying to emulate Swagger's precision, Peña leaned into Memphis's inexperience, portraying a man who learns the hard way that law enforcement isn't just about following the rules, it's about survival. On set, Peña and Wahlberg developed an easy chemistry. Between takes, Peña was often the one cracking jokes, keeping the atmosphere light even during the film's most intense moments. Wahlberg later recalled that Peña would sometimes improvise lines just to see if he could make him break character. One of the funniest moments happened during an interrogation scene. Peña threw in an unexpected one-liner that caught Wahlberg so off guard that he had to turn away from the camera to keep from laughing. But perhaps the most chilling performance in Shooter came from Danny Glover, who played the corrupt Senator Charles Meacham. Glover brought a sense of calm, calculated menace to the role, making Meacham one of the most memorable villains in action cinema. Unlike many over-the-top antagonists, Meacham never raises his voice, never loses his composure. He doesn't need to. His power comes from his influence, his ability to control events without ever pulling a trigger himself. Glover admitted that playing a character like Meacham was both fascinating and disturbing. In interviews, he explained that Meacham represents a kind of evil that is more terrifying than any hired assassin or military operative. He is a man who understands how power works, how to manipulate the system, and how to ensure that justice never reaches the people who truly deserve it. Glover's portrayal was so effective that even Wahlberg admitted that there were moments on set where he felt genuinely uneasy while filming scenes with him. For director Antoine Fuqua, casting was one of the most important elements of making Shooter feel authentic. Fuqua, known for his ability to create gritty, immersive action films, wanted actors who could bring both realism and depth to their roles. He wanted Swagger to feel like a real soldier, not just a Hollywood action star with a gun. Wahlberg's commitment to the role impressed him from the beginning, and he encouraged the cast to push themselves both physically and emotionally. But behind the intense training and serious performances, there were also plenty of light-hearted moments on set. Wahlberg and Peña often competed to see who could complete stunt sequences the fastest, with Peña joking that he was trying to prove that the FBI was just as tough as the Marines. Glover, despite playing the film's main villain, was known for making the crew laugh between takes, sometimes delivering his lines in an exaggerated, Shakespearean style just to break the tension. When Shooter was released in 2007, it received a mix of critical reviews. Some praised its tight direction, realistic action, and Wahlberg's commanding performance. Others criticized its heavy political undertones and predictable plot. But while critics were divided, audiences connected with the film in a way that no review could predict. The film quickly developed a loyal fan base, particularly among military veterans and action thriller enthusiasts. Many former snipers and soldiers praised the film's accuracy in depicting sniper techniques, ballistics, and battlefield tactics. Unlike other Hollywood action movies, Shooter didn't rely on over-the-top shootouts or unrealistic gunplay. It showcased the patience, precision, and discipline required to be a marksman. One of the most talked-about aspects of the film was its underlying themes of government corruption and justice. The film quickly developed a loyal fan base, particularly among military veterans and action thriller enthusiasts. Many former snipers and soldiers praised the film's accuracy in depicting sniper techniques, ballistics, and battlefield tactics. Unlike other Hollywood action movies, Shooter didn't rely on over-the-top shootouts or unrealistic gunplay. It showcased the patience, precision, and discipline required to be a marksman. One of the most talked-about aspects of the film was its underlying themes of government corruption and justice. Many viewers felt that Shooter hit uncomfortably close to reality, touching on real-world issues of war, political manipulation, and the way soldiers are often discarded after serving their country. Wahlberg later reflected that this was one of the reasons the film resonated so deeply with audiences. It wasn't just action for the sake of action. It was a story about betrayal, survival, and the fight for truth. Years after its release, Shooter continues to be regarded as one of Wahlberg's best action films. It may not have broken box office records, but its influence has endured, leading to a television adaptation and continued discussions about its themes and impact. Fans still debate whether Swagger's actions were justified, whether Memphis's transformation was realistic, and whether Meacham's fate was truly enough to balance the scales of justice. Ultimately, the success of Shooter came not just from its story, but from the people who brought it to life. Wahlberg's dedication, Peña's energy, Glover's quiet menace, and Fuqua's expert direction all combined to create a film that feels just as sharp and impactful today as it did upon release. And as long as audiences continue to be drawn to stories of justice in a corrupt world, Shooter will remain a film that refuses to fade into the background. From its opening moments to its final pulse-pounding scenes, Shooter has proven itself to be far more than just another action thriller. It is a story of betrayal, survival, and the fight for justice in a world that often protects the corrupt while sacrificing those who serve. Through its gripping narrative, intense performances, and stunning cinematography, the film brings the audience into the mind of Bob Lee Swagger, a man who sees the world differently, not just as a battlefield, but as a system of angles, calculations, and inevitable consequences. At the heart of the film is Mark Wahlberg's raw and commanding performance as Swagger. His transformation into a highly trained sniper, both physically and mentally, was nothing short of remarkable. From his months of rigorous training with real Marine snipers to his understanding of ballistics, breathing control, and survival techniques, Wahlberg committed himself fully to the role. He didn't just play a sniper, he became one, embodying the discipline, patience, and calculated precision that define the character. The supporting cast added even more depth to the film, with Peña bringing a mix of vulnerability and determination to the role of Nick Memphis, a character whose journey from a naive FBI agent to a hardened ally of Swagger mirrored the audience's own realization of the corruption at play. Danny Glover's chilling performance as Senator Meacham brought a different kind of villain to the screen, one who doesn't need brute force to manipulate the world, only power and influence. His calm, smug demeanor was a reminder that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who never lift a finger themselves. Beyond its characters, Shooter excelled in its commitment to realism. Every sniper shot, every tactical maneuver, every piece of military equipment was carefully selected and executed with authenticity in mind. The cinematography played a crucial role in shaping the film's mood, shifting between wide, calculated shots that reflect Swagger's sniper perspective and tense, claustrophobic angles that trap him in the world of deception he is trying to escape. The themes of justice, corruption, and betrayal resonated deeply with audiences, turning Shooter into more than just an action movie. It became a reflection of real-world truths, where institutions protect themselves, heroes are discarded, and justice often feels out of reach. The film's ending, where Swagger takes matters into his own hands, left viewers with a sense of satisfaction but also an unsettling realization. Justice in the real world does not always follow the rules. While Shooter may not have been a box office juggernaut upon release, its impact has only grown over time. It found a devoted audience, particularly among military enthusiasts and fans of tactical thrillers. The film's attention to detail, gripping performances, and relentless pacing ensured that it stood the test of time, maintaining its place as one of the most respected sniper films in modern cinema. Years later, Shooter has continued to be celebrated for its sharp storytelling, realistic action sequences, and thought-provoking themes. The questions it raises about power, truth, and the cost of fighting back remain as relevant as ever, ensuring that Bob Lee Swagger's story will continue to captivate new audiences for years to come. And if you've enjoyed diving deep into the world of Shooter and the incredible details behind its production, performances, and legacy, make sure to subscribe for more movie analysis, deep dives, and exclusive behind-the-scenes stories. There's always more to uncover in the world of cinema, and we're here to bring you the best insights into the films that leave a lasting impact. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep exploring the incredible world of movies.